February 18, 1945. Okinawa, the southern edge of the island. The humid morning mist clung to the jagged cliffs and the dense underbrush of the island's rugged terrain. In the distance, the guttural roar of artillery punctuated the low drone of incoming aircraft. Japanese defensive positions, carved meticulously into the rocky slopes and camouflaged beneath layers of bamboo and foliage, awaited the inevitable. Yet behind the trembling lines, a peculiar anxiety gripped the soldiers, a whisper of unease that even the most seasoned commanders could not explain. It was not the tanks, nor the relentless bombardment, nor even the precision of naval gunfire that unsettled them. It was the eerie efficiency and calm precision of the American medical units advancing alongside the infantry. Hidden in plain sight, these teams moved with a purpose that defied the chaotic destruction around them. The Japanese nurses stationed at forward aid stations watched in stunned disbelief as wounded soldiers, some with grievous injuries that would have been fatal weeks before, were carried into American field hospitals. They observed through the haze of smoke and dust as surgeons, encased in blood-stained smocks, operated with instruments that seemed almost alien. Metallic glints flashed under the diffused sunlight, each motion deliberate, each incision precise. There were no panicked scrambles, no frantic calls for additional supplies. The surgeons worked with a rhythm that was hypnotic, almost mechanical, yet imbued with human judgment and instinct, honed by years of intense training and battlefield experience. In one makeshift operating tent, a soldier with shrapnel embedded deep in his thigh was wheeled onto a stretcher. The Japanese nurses pressed themselves against the wooden supports of the nearby trench, peering cautiously. Within moments, American surgeons had cleaned the wound, assessed vascular damage and prepared for extraction, all while issuing crisp commands that sliced through the cacophony of battle. The nurses' eyes widened as they noted the instruments: high-speed drills for bone, portable suction devices, and sterilization equipment that operated off small generators, all assembled on meticulously organized trays. They whispered among themselves in disbelief. How can they do this so quickly?" one whispered, clutching her worn medical apron. Another simply shook her head, unable to articulate the shock coursing through her. The Japanese had prided themselves on discipline, on the inflexibility of their military doctrine, and on their centuries-old understanding of battlefield medicine. Yet, they were witnessing a system that redefined those very standards. It was as if the Americans had mastered a rhythm of war that incorporated not only firepower, but preservation, an extension of combat effectiveness measured in lives saved and returned to the front lines. As the day stretched on, the fog of war thickened, shrouding the island in a haze that mixed smoke, sweat, and the unmistakable tang of antiseptic. Ambulances, armored and unarmored, moved in a synchronized ballet, ferrying the wounded from forward positions to mobile surgical units. The surgeons seemed impervious to the chaos. Their focus was unwavering, their decisions rapid yet precise. One young medic, barely 20, assisted in the removal of a bullet lodged dangerously close to an artery. His hands trembled initially, but under the stern guidance of the lead surgeon, they became instruments of life, steady and resolute. Outside the tents, Japanese infantry observed the scene with unease. They had been trained to expect devastation, attrition, and suffering. They were prepared for the body counts that would define the success of a battle. But this was different. Men who should have succumbed to injuries were walking again, their bodies patched together, with an efficiency that contradicted the natural order of war as they understood it. The psychological impact was immediate. Officers whispered of the unnatural advantage these Americans possessed, of a capability that went beyond tanks and rifles. In personal diaries later recovered, several Japanese nurses wrote of their astonishment. They had never imagined medicine could operate with such speed under the pressures of the front line, let alone in a theater as unforgiving as Okinawa. The field hospitals themselves were a marvel of innovation. Large canvas tents, reinforced with steel poles, contained rows of operating tables, each equipped with portable lighting, sterilization tools, and surgical instruments that could rival a city hospital back home. The Americans had devised mobile anesthesia units, ensuring that even in the middle of a chaotic battlefield, patients could be rendered unconscious safely, allowing surgeons to perform complex procedures without delay. Nurses, trained to anticipate every need of the surgeons, moved with the precision of a clockwork mechanism, handing instruments without pause, applying dressings, and monitoring vital signs with a meticulous attention that was both clinical and cinematic. Japanese medical teams could only gape at the synchronized efficiency. The shock was compounded by the Americans' ability to adapt on the fly. When a generator failed, a replacement was rigged from vehicle batteries. When a surgical instrument dulled, another appeared seamlessly from a backup kit. Each improvisation was methodical, not frantic, maintaining the flow of operations under circumstances that would have broken lesser teams. Among the most remarkable aspects observed by Japanese nurses was the use of X-ray technology near the front lines. Portable units, bulky yet ingeniously engineered, provided instant imaging that allowed surgeons to locate bullets, shrapnel, and fractured bones with unprecedented speed. The nurses noted that no step was left to guesswork. Every incision, every maneuver, was informed by a level of foresight that bordered on prescience. As the sun climbed higher, the rhythm of the American field hospitals became almost hypnotic. The clash of rifles and the distant thud of artillery became a muted backdrop to the symphony of surgical precision. Each successful operation returned a soldier not just to life but to the morale of his comrades. Each failure, though rare, was met with rapid adaptation and learned adjustments for subsequent cases. In the trenches and observation posts, Japanese commanders struggled to reconcile this new form of battlefield efficiency with their existing strategies. They had counted on attrition, on the inevitability of casualties to sap the enemy's will. Yet here death was not guaranteed. The Americans seemed to bend the natural laws of war, converting severe injuries into survivable events. Fear and respect began to intermingle. The nurses, in their private moments, sketched diagrams and notes, trying to capture the techniques and instruments they could not yet comprehend. They whispered stories of scalpels that seemed to anticipate the injury, of suction devices that cleared wounds with a quiet hum, and of teams that communicated silently through gestures honed over countless drills. By dusk, the island bore the marks of relentless combat, yet the American field hospitals stood as islands of order amidst chaos. Japanese nurses, exhausted from the day's observations, could not shake the profound impression of what they had witnessed. They would carry these images in their minds for years, a testament to a new dimension of warfare, one where survival, speed, and surgical precision could rival the destructive power of artillery and infantry alike. Even as night fell, sending long shadows over the ravaged landscape, the efficiency of the American Medical Corps continued unabated. Lanterns illuminated operating tables, the metallic clink of instruments, a constant rhythm against the distant echo of battle. And in that eerie calm, Japanese nurses recognized a truth that would forever challenge their understanding of the war. In the hands of the Americans, medicine had become a weapon, precise, lethal in its efficiency, and utterly incomprehensible to those who had known only the harsh calculus of death and survival. It was a revelation that would ripple through their ranks, altering perceptions of what constituted strength and advantage in the theater of war, and planting seeds of both fear and reluctant admiration in hearts hardened by years of conflict. By early 1945, the Pacific Theater had become a crucible of attrition, a relentless collision of strategy, technology, and human endurance. The Battle of Okinawa, codenamed Operation Iceberg by the Allies, was more than a mere island confrontation. It was a proving ground for the evolution of modern warfare, a clash where every tactical innovation, logistical maneuver, and medical advancement could tilt the scales of survival and victory. Japan had fortified the island over months with a network of caves, bunkers, and hidden artillery positions, an intricate lattice of defenses that leveraged terrain to deadly effect. Their soldiers were seasoned, drawn from battlefields across China, the Philippines, and the Pacific, hardened by years of conflict and instilled with a doctrine that equated resilience with sacrifice. In the minds of Japanese commanders, the expected outcome was simple: a war of attrition where the invader would bleed under relentless resistance, where the human cost itself would serve as a weapon of deterrence. American forces, however, brought to Okinawa not only overwhelming naval and air superiority, but a suite of innovations, both in strategy and support, that disrupted these traditional assumptions. Amphibious landings, coordinated bombardments, and an intricate supply chain designed to keep the assault continuous and unrelenting formed the backbone of the campaign. Yet among these elements, a quieter, less obvious advantage began to emerge: the integration of advanced medical capability directly into frontline operations. Unlike previous campaigns, where wounded soldiers might languish hours or even days before receiving treatment, the US military had developed a philosophy that viewed survival as a strategic multiplier. Every life saved, every grievous injury treated quickly and effectively, meant not just a soldier returned to duty, but the preservation of morale, cohesion, and fighting capacity on the battlefield. The juxtaposition of American medical innovation against the traditional Japanese doctrine created a subtle but profound disruption. Commanders and nurses stationed in forward positions could not reconcile how injuries that should have proven fatal were being reversed with a speed and efficiency that defied expectation. The Japanese military medical system, built on centuries of experience and constrained by material scarcity and procedural rigidity, struggled to match the mobility, technology, and training of their adversaries. This contrast would not merely influence casualty reports, it would shape the psychological landscape of the battle. Within the American framework, field hospitals were no longer static institutions. They were mobile, highly organized, and fully integrated into combat strategy. Each surgical unit operated with autonomy, yet remained connected to the broader operational network. Commanders could anticipate medical needs, allocate resources in real time, and ensure that wounded personnel were stabilized almost immediately after injury. Nurses and medics were trained not only in traditional care, but in rapid assessment and battlefield triage, capable of transforming chaos into coordinated action. For the Japanese observers, particularly the nurses who witnessed these operations firsthand, this integration seemed almost unnatural, a challenge to the principles that had guided them through prior campaigns. The Allied approach blended logistics, engineering, and human skill in a way that redefined the very concept of battlefield readiness. It was not merely the instruments or technology, though these were impressive in isolation. It was the orchestration of personnel, supplies, and tactical foresight that created an invisible advantage. Each soldier saved represented not just an individual life, but a reinforcement of collective momentum. As the days of February 1945 wore on, this advantage began to manifest in stark contrast to Japanese expectations. Forward positions, once considered invulnerable due to natural terrain and fortifications, found that the human cost inflicted upon the Americans was mitigated by rapid medical intervention. Wounded troops, previously a liability, became resilient participants in the ongoing engagement. For Japanese command staff, this required a re-evaluation of attrition-based strategy. Every encounter now carried the uncertainty of facing opponents who could absorb damage in ways that seemed almost preternatural. Commanders recorded growing frustration in intercepted communications. Reports indicated that attacks causing severe injuries did not yield the expected demoralization. Units that should have faltered remained operational, returning to positions with a speed that negated the anticipated impact of combat losses. Within the broader context of the Pacific War, Okinawa represented a microcosm of evolving doctrines. The Japanese had become adept at exploiting terrain, utilizing underground fortifications, and maximizing defensive firepower. Yet they faced an enemy that was learning to integrate every aspect of modern technology, logistics, and human skill into a seamless operational continuum. The presence of advanced medical capability in forward areas was a key component of this continuum. Japanese nurses, whose duties placed them close to the front lines, began documenting what they observed in meticulous notes, often recording details of American surgical techniques, instruments, and organizational methods with a mixture of awe and professional curiosity. These first-hand accounts would later provide historians with invaluable insights into the psychological impact of medical innovation on combatants unaccustomed to such efficiency. The integration of field hospitals with operational units also reflected a fundamental shift in American military philosophy. Combat effectiveness was no longer measured solely by firepower or territorial gain, but by the capacity to maintain human capital under extreme conditions. Commanders understood that soldiers could not perform optimally if they feared that injury equaled death or permanent incapacitation. By mitigating this fear, the Americans not only preserved lives but amplified operational cohesion, ensuring that units remained functionally intact even under relentless assault. The Japanese military, by contrast, remained constrained by a doctrine that assumed human attrition as inevitable and largely immutable. Medical personnel, though dedicated, operated under supply limitations, rigid procedural norms, and fragmented communication channels. The presence of American surgeons performing with precision, employing advanced tools, and achieving rapid recovery challenged the very core of Japanese tactical assumptions. In tactical debriefings and post-battle analysis, Japanese officers frequently expressed a sense of disorientation and disbelief. They noted how American units seemed to rebound from attacks that should have inflicted crippling casualties. Field diaries from Japanese nurses described a mix of fear, admiration, and confusion. They recorded the metallic glint of instruments, the rapid yet controlled movements of surgical teams, and the almost ritualistic coordination of medical staff amidst the chaos of artillery, smoke, and the cries of the wounded. These observations would later inform Japanese medical reform efforts and influence strategic thinking in the final months of the war. By situating medical innovation at the center of battlefield planning, the Americans had introduced a subtle yet decisive element into combat operations. It was a quiet, almost invisible advantage, but one that reshaped outcomes, altered morale, and confounded enemy expectations. Okinawa was not only a test of weaponry and manpower, but of human ingenuity, adaptability, and the capacity to harness technology in service of life-preserving efficiency. The Japanese, conditioned to view battlefield medicine as an ancillary function, were forced to confront a new paradigm. Survival could be engineered with the same rigor as offense and defense, and in this, the Americans had created an advantage that extended beyond the immediate engagement. In the smoke and blood of Okinawa, as artillery shells churned the earth and soldiers pressed forward under relentless fire, the quiet precision of American surgical teams signaled a transformation in the nature of war itself. It was a revelation that would echo far beyond the Pacific, shaping doctrines, influencing post-war military thought, and challenging the very assumptions of what constituted strength on the battlefield. Amid the chaos of Okinawa, the hidden advantage of the American forces began to reveal itself in ways that the Japanese could neither predict nor counter. This was not merely the presence of trained medics or the deployment of field hospitals. It was the integration of cutting-edge surgical technology and operational efficiency directly into the flow of combat. Japanese nurses, stationed at forward aid posts, were the first to bear witness. They observed in stunned silence as casualties were evacuated from the front lines, and within minutes wheeled into tents where surgeons operated with a calm, almost clinical rhythm. The tools themselves were unlike anything the nurses had seen before: high-speed drills for bone fractures, portable suction devices that cleared wounds in seconds, sterilized instruments laid out with meticulous order, and anesthesia equipment that allowed complex procedures even amidst the roar of distant artillery. Each motion was purposeful, deliberate, and synchronized. The American medical teams communicated in a language of precision, a combination of verbal commands and practiced gestures honed through relentless drills. It was as if the battlefield had been expanded to include not only the terrain of conflict, but also the theater of human survival. Japanese soldiers, expecting wounded enemies to remain incapacitated, were forced to confront the reality that these Americans could take severe injuries and return men to the fight with astonishing speed. In one instance, a Japanese nurse recorded observing a soldier with a shattered femur, an injury that would have been considered fatal in earlier campaigns. Within 30 minutes, the American surgical team had stabilized the fracture, repaired damaged blood vessels, and prepared the soldier for transfer to a recovery unit. The speed and efficiency were disorienting. To the Japanese, it seemed as if the Americans had developed a method to bend the natural laws of survival in war. This hidden advantage was not accidental. It was the result of years of planning, research, and innovation. The Americans had understood that in a theater as unforgiving as the Pacific, The ability to save lives was as critical as the ability to kill. Forward surgical units, equipped with the latest instruments and staffed by highly trained personnel, allowed commanders to maintain combat effectiveness in ways that previous doctrines had not anticipated. Radios and communication networks ensured that medics could coordinate seamlessly with supply units, ambulances, and rear hospitals, creating a continuous chain of care. From the perspective of the Japanese forces, the discrepancy was staggering. Their doctrine emphasized attrition and the inevitability of battlefield losses. They assumed that severe injuries would naturally degrade enemy morale and combat capacity. Yet at Okinawa, these expectations were repeatedly subverted. Soldiers who should have been removed from combat were returning to positions, their recovery accelerated by technologies and techniques that seemed almost preternatural. The Japanese nurses' astonishment extended beyond the immediate technical capabilities. They noted how the Americans had trained their personnel to operate under extreme stress, to maintain focus amidst artillery bombardments and screaming infantry, and to anticipate complications before they occurred. Every action was rehearsed, every contingency accounted for. The result was a medical operation that appeared seamless to an observer, a choreography of human skill and technological advantage executed under fire. This integration of medicine into the operational framework provided not only physical survival, but also a psychological advantage. American soldiers, aware that they could be treated rapidly for severe injuries, displayed greater resilience and maintained higher morale under sustained enemy fire. They fought with the knowledge that their lives were being preserved as a strategic resource. Japanese forces, witnessing this dynamic, experienced confusion and frustration. Commanders found that attacks designed to inflict maximum casualties often fell short of their intended effect. Reports captured in diaries and field logs reflect a growing recognition of an invisible but decisive factor shaping the battle. The American capacity to save lives with speed and precision was itself a weapon. The Americans had also anticipated logistical challenges with remarkable foresight. Surgical units were mobile, capable of advancing with the front lines, yet fully stocked with essential supplies. Sterilization equipment, portable lighting, and anesthesia machines were compact, robust, and designed to withstand the harsh conditions of an active battlefield. This mobility ensured that medical interventions could occur near the point of injury, drastically reducing the time between wounding and treatment, a factor that directly increased survival rates. Japanese nurses, trained under conditions where delay and scarcity were the norm, found themselves confronting an entirely new paradigm. They marveled at the assembly lines of care that unfolded before their eyes, stretchers moving swiftly, surgeons working in synchronized precision, medics anticipating needs before they were voiced, and instruments sterilized and ready at a moment's notice. Even the wounded themselves often expressed astonishment, noting that their injuries, which would have meant certain death or permanent disability in previous battles, were being treated with remarkable efficiency and success. The Americans' hidden advantage extended beyond technology and training. It was also rooted in doctrine and culture. Military medical teams were empowered to act decisively, to innovate on the spot, and to prioritize life-saving interventions without bureaucratic delay. Decisions that might have stalled in hierarchical structures elsewhere were executed instantly, with clear lines of responsibility and accountability. Japanese observers could see that this approach fundamentally altered the calculus of battle. Injury no longer equaled attrition. Instead, it became a temporary setback, mitigated by preparation, technology, and human skill. The psychological impact on both sides was profound. American troops gained confidence from the knowledge that injury could be treated effectively, allowing them to operate with greater daring and cohesion. Japanese forces, meanwhile, faced the disorienting realization that traditional strategies, relying on inflicting maximum casualties to weaken morale, were less effective. Soldiers returned to the fight more quickly than anticipated, and entire units maintained operational capacity despite the intensity of combat. As the days progressed, the Japanese nurses continued to document these occurrences meticulously. They recorded the specific instruments, the sequence of surgical procedures, and the coordination between medical and combat units. Their notes, filled with diagrams and astonished commentary, would later serve as historical testimony to the Americans' ability to blend technology, training and tactical foresight into a cohesive system of battlefield survival. In essence, the hidden advantage of the American forces at Okinawa was a synthesis of innovation, preparation, and execution. It was visible in the precision of their instruments, the skill of their surgeons, and the seamless integration of medical units into frontline operations. It confounded expectations, reshaped the dynamics of the battle, and forced the Japanese to confront a form of warfare that extended beyond firepower alone. The surgeons and medics were not merely healers, they were strategic assets, their efficiency amplifying the effectiveness of every American unit on the field. And in the eyes of the Japanese nurses who observed, recorded, and struggled to comprehend this unprecedented capability, it became clear that survival itself had become a weapon, wielded with calculated skill and terrifying effectiveness. Beneath the calm, almost hypnotic efficiency of the American field hospitals at Okinawa lay a world of engineering and logistical mastery that was as intricate as the battlefield itself. Every instrument, every device, every piece of surgical equipment had been conceived, refined and mass-produced to withstand the extreme conditions of the front lines. The surgeons' scalpels were not mere sharpened steel. They were precision-engineered tools, tempered for durability and balanced for flawless handling. Each cutting edge was honed to maintain integrity through hundreds of procedures without resharpening, ensuring that no incision faltered, no error arose from equipment failure. Beyond the scalpel, the high-speed surgical drills were marvels of innovation. Powered by portable generators or compact battery units, these devices allowed surgeons to bore into bone with unprecedented speed, reducing operative time dramatically. A typical drill weighed less than 12 pounds, yet could rotate at several thousand revolutions per minute, a combination of power and portability that had never been seen on a battlefield. Japanese nurses, accustomed to primitive field implements and improvisation, could only stare in awe as a drill was applied to a compound fracture, the surgeon's hands steady as if guided by instinct and machine in perfect harmony. Suction devices were another revelation. Portable units mounted on wheeled carts or compact frames removed blood and bodily fluids instantaneously, maintaining a clear field of view and reducing infection risk. These machines operated quietly but effectively, powered by small gasoline or battery engines, allowing for continuous operation without interruption, even as artillery shook the earth outside the tents. The sterilization equipment further showcased American ingenuity. Autoclaves, compact yet robust, could produce steam under pressure in mere minutes, ensuring that instruments were sanitized between procedures. In an environment where infection was often as deadly as enemy fire, this capability fundamentally shifted the balance of survival. No longer did a minor wound carry the potential to become a fatal complication. The Americans had engineered a system to anticipate, prevent, and counteract the perils of battlefield medicine. Beyond individual tools, the entire infrastructure of the field hospitals demonstrated meticulous planning. Tents were reinforced with steel frames, floors lined to prevent waterlogging, and lighting systems powered by portable generators or vehicle-linked circuits. Each table, tray, and kit was arranged according to standardized layouts, reducing the cognitive load on surgeons and nurses, allowing them to focus entirely on life-saving tasks. Japanese observers were struck by the combination of foresight and adaptability. Even when generators failed, replacements were rigged instantly from vehicle batteries. When instruments dulled, backups were seamlessly deployed. Every contingency had been anticipated, every potential disruption accounted for. At the core of this efficiency was the human element. Highly trained personnel capable of operating under extreme stress with unwavering precision. Surgeons had undergone rigorous training, combining traditional medical knowledge with specialized battlefield procedures. Nurses and medics were drilled repeatedly in triage, instrument handling, and emergency improvisation. The result was a team that functioned almost as a single organism, each member anticipating the next move, minimizing delay, and maximizing survival outcomes. Production numbers and logistics reflected the scale of this endeavor. Factories across the United States, from the bustling assembly lines of Detroit to specialized military medical workshops, churned out surgical instruments sterilization units, and portable devices in vast quantities. Motorola and other electronics manufacturers produced radios that linked forward surgical units with command centers, ensuring coordination and rapid response. The American industrial machine, already mobilized for total war, extended its reach into the intimate and precise realm of medical engineering, creating equipment that could survive the rigors of amphibious assault, tropical humidity, and battlefield shock while delivering unmatched functionality. Anesthesia equipment exemplified the blend of engineering and medical science. Portable units allowed surgeons to induce unconsciousness safely, maintaining precise control over dosage and patient monitoring even in the midst of bombardment. Vital sign monitors, compact and durable, tracked pulse, respiration, and blood pressure, feeding real-time information to the surgical team. The Japanese nurses, whose own equipment often consisted of makeshift stretchers, rudimentary bandages, and limited anesthetics, were astonished. They noted in diaries the almost ritualistic preparation before each procedure, the surgeon's instruments laid out like an orchestra, suction devices humming softly, sterilization units cycling continuously, and anesthesia carefully titrated to maintain stability. The cumulative effect was more than operational efficiency. It was a psychological signal of inevitability. Wounds that would have demoralized troops in other circumstances were now challenges that could be overcome. American soldiers moved with confidence, knowing that the machinery of survival was robust, mobile, and reliable. The Japanese, conversely, were forced to confront the unsettling reality that their attrition-based strategy was undermined by a capability they had not accounted for. Even in the midst of firefights and relentless shelling, the field hospitals functioned with a precision that resembled civilian medical facilities more than warfront installations. This contrast highlighted a fundamental shift in military philosophy. Survival had become as engineered and methodical as destruction. In technical terms, the forward surgical teams represented a convergence of mechanical engineering, medical science, and logistical orchestration. Each instrument was optimized for battlefield use, each procedure refined for speed and efficacy, each team member trained to integrate seamlessly with both human and mechanical components of the system. The Japanese nurses' astonishment stemmed not only from the visible technology, but from the invisible mastery of workflow, coordination, and anticipation that rendered the hospitals almost impervious to chaos. Even minor innovations carried strategic significance. Portable X-ray units allowed for rapid imaging of fractures and embedded shrapnel, informing surgical decisions with precision that minimized guesswork and prevented errors. Sterilization processes cut infection rates dramatically, ensuring that recovery was possible even in tropical climates. Suction and irrigation systems reduced operative times, allowing surgeons to treat more casualties without compromising quality. Each element, when combined, created an advantage that was subtle in appearance but overwhelming in effect. American soldiers were not just surviving, they were returning to combat stronger and faster than their adversaries expected. The engineers, doctors, and logistics officers behind this system understood that victory in modern warfare demanded more than artillery superiority or infantry tactics. It required the ability to preserve life under conditions that would otherwise guarantee attrition. This philosophy extended beyond individual battles. It was a force multiplier, reshaping the operational landscape at Okinawa and setting a precedent for future conflicts. Japanese accounts from the front lines described a mixture of fear, awe, and confusion. Nurses wrote of surgical tools that seemed alive, of teams that moved as if guided by instinct, and of procedures executed with a calm precision that defied the surrounding chaos. These testimonies would later inform military historians about the invisible advantage that American engineering and medical innovation had created, a battlefield where technology and human skill merged to transform survival into a strategic weapon, one that the enemy could neither anticipate nor easily counter. In essence, the technical deep dive at Okinawa was not simply a story of instruments and machines. It was a story of foresight, preparation, and the transformative power of integrating life-saving technology directly into the mechanics of war. It was a revelation that reshaped understanding of both human endurance and the strategic value of preserving it in the crucible of Combat April 1st, 1945. The beaches of Okinawa were shrouded in a deceptive calm, the aftermath of pre-dawn bombardments leaving the sand blackened and littered with debris. American infantry units, having secured tenuous footholds on the western coast, faced a labyrinth of defensive positions carved into the jagged cliffs and dense vegetation. Among the chaos, the forward surgical teams were already in motion, their tents erected mere yards from the front lines, engines humming as generators powered lights, suction devices and sterilization units. Japanese observers, hidden in shallow foxholes and camouflaged bunkers, watched with a mixture of dread and disbelief as American ambulances moved with purpose, evacuating casualties who moments before had lain helpless in the sand. At the center of this orchestrated operation was a decisive engagement near Hacksaw Ridge, where a platoon of Japanese defenders unleashed relentless machine gun fire upon advancing infantry. The Americans responded with coordinated suppressive fire, and within minutes, medics were maneuvering through the chaos, assessing wounds with practiced swiftness. A young corporal hit by shrapnel in the thigh and abdomen was lifted onto a stretcher under continuous fire. His wound was severe, arterial damage that in previous campaigns would have been fatal before aid could arrive. Yet the surgical team, stationed mere yards from the engagement, was ready. In a canvas tent flanked by armored vehicles, the lead surgeon directed his team with calm authority. Instruments were selected with precision: a high-speed drill for a shattered femur, suction devices to clear blood, and sterilized scalpels for delicate vascular repair. Anesthesia was administered through portable units, calibrated to maintain the corporal unconscious without risk of overdose. The procedure, executed under the constant din of battle, lasted less than 45 minutes, a time frame that Japanese medical personnel would later describe as miraculous. Outside, the rhythm of evacuation and treatment continued without interruption. Wounded soldiers, some crawling from the sand under their own power, were intercepted by medics and transported to surgical units before shock could claim them. Japanese nurses, observing from concealed positions, scribbled frantic notes attempting to catalogue instruments, techniques, and procedural sequences. Their shock was compounded when soldiers returned to combat within days, their injuries stabilized, mobility restored, and morale intact. The American approach relied not only on speed, but on anticipation. Each casualty assessment was informed by rapid triage protocols, allowing the team to prioritize life-threatening injuries and allocate surgical resources efficiently. Portable X-ray units provided imaging near the point of injury, guiding surgical decisions with unprecedented accuracy. Blood transfusions, conducted with mobile refrigeration and filtration units, stabilized patients for immediate surgery. Every element worked in concert, a symphony of logistics and precision under fire. Japanese reports from the engagement near Hacksaw Ridge captured the confusion and disbelief among the defenders. They noted the rapid recovery of American soldiers, the near instantaneous treatment of severe wounds, and the unbroken cohesion of units that had sustained heavy casualties. Officers recorded frustration at the ineffectiveness of traditional attrition tactics, observing that men they had expected to be removed from the fight returned within days, fully capable of engaging in combat once again. The psychological impact on both sides was profound. American infantry, emboldened by the knowledge that medical units could stabilize even catastrophic injuries, advanced with calculated aggression. Morale surged, and cohesion remained unbroken despite relentless enemy fire. Japanese soldiers, meanwhile, faced the disorienting reality that their defensive firepower could not inflict the expected long-term attrition. Casualty reports, intercepted communications, and field diaries reflected a growing sense of unease and a re-evaluation of strategy in real time. The battle also demonstrated the logistical prowess underpinning American medical operations. Supply lines ensured that surgical units were never understocked. Sterilization, anesthesia, surgical instruments, and even specialized devices like bone drills were delivered continuously via trucks, amphibious vehicles, and coordinated airdrops. The redundancy built into the system meant that failures were rare, and improvisation could occur without loss of operational tempo. Japanese nurses observed with fascination the integration of technology and human skill. The seamless interaction between medics, surgeons, and support personnel created an almost hypnotic efficiency. Stretchers were passed fluidly, instruments moved without pause, and each procedural step was executed with an instinctive understanding of the next. In post-battle interviews, several American medics reflected on the unspoken coordination that emerged from intensive training, where every action anticipated the needs of both patient and team. The outcome of the engagement near Hacksaw Ridge underscored the strategic value of this hidden advantage. American units sustained fewer permanent losses than expected, enabling continuous offensive pressure. Casualties, while unavoidable, were mitigated by rapid stabilization and recovery, allowing soldiers to return to positions that Japanese forces assumed would remain uncontested for weeks. The Japanese, conditioned to measure success by immediate enemy incapacitation, found their assumptions repeatedly invalidated. In personal diaries, nurses described repeated instances of astonishment. Soldiers who should have succumbed to wounds were walking, returning to their units, and even participating in counterattacks within days. The coordination between surgical units and combat forces extended the tactical lifespan of every soldier. This advantage was compounded by the Americans' ability to adapt procedures in real time. When new types of injuries emerged from artillery or aerial bombardment, surgical teams modified techniques, improvised with available instruments, and incorporated lessons learned into the ongoing campaign. The result was a continuously evolving medical doctrine, resilient and responsive, in a way that Japanese forces struggled to comprehend. Beyond individual engagements, the cumulative effect was decisive. Commanders observed the preservation of combat strength despite sustained attacks, units maintaining cohesion under fire, and morale that remained high even after severe losses. The integration of advanced surgical techniques into frontline operations effectively amplified American fighting capacity, transforming what had been considered a logistical necessity into a strategic force multiplier. By nightfall, the beaches and cliffs bore the scars of relentless combat. Yet the American surgical teams remained operational, tents illuminated, generators humming, and instruments sterilized for the next wave of casualties. Japanese nurses, exhausted from the day's observations, recorded their accounts with a mixture of fear, admiration, and disbelief. They had witnessed a form of warfare in which life preservation, speed, and technological integration were leveraged as tactical weapons. The battle near Hacksaw Ridge thus became emblematic of the broader impact of American medical innovation in the Pacific. Casualties were treated with a precision and efficiency that directly influenced operational outcomes, confounded enemy expectations, and reshaped the strategic and psychological landscape of the conflict. It was a vivid demonstration that in modern warfare survival could be engineered, and that such capability could wield as much influence as firepower or terrain dominance. The strategic and psychological impact of these advanced medical capabilities at Okinawa rippled through every level of both American and Japanese forces, reshaping not only the immediate battlefield, but the broader conduct of the Pacific campaign. For the Americans, the integration of forward surgical teams, rapid evacuation protocols, and cutting-edge equipment translated into a profound enhancement of operational effectiveness. Every soldier saved was more than an individual life preserved. Each represented an extension of unit cohesion, morale, and combat potential. Platoons that might have been rendered ineffective by severe casualties remained cohesive, their operational tempo unbroken despite relentless artillery, sniper fire, and entrenched Japanese defenses. Commanders, observing the efficacy of these medical units, began incorporating their presence into operational planning, recognizing that medical readiness could dictate the timing, intensity, and duration of attacks. The psychological advantage was equally potent. Soldiers knew that injury was no longer synonymous with permanent incapacitation or death. The knowledge that medics and surgeons could operate with precision, even amidst chaos, instilled a level of confidence that translated into bold, coordinated assaults on entrenched positions. Fear was mitigated not by chance but by design, a force multiplier as tangible as tanks or artillery. The Japanese forces, conversely, were forced to confront a disorienting reality. Their doctrine, honed over decades and reinforced by cultural imperatives valuing stoic endurance and the inevitability of attrition, assumed that inflicting casualties would degrade enemy morale and diminish combat capacity. Yet at Okinawa, these expectations were repeatedly confounded. Soldiers who should have been permanently removed from the fight recovered rapidly, often returning to frontline positions within days. Units remained operational at levels far above anticipated thresholds, while morale among American forces remained robust even in the face of punishing fire. Field reports and intercepted communications reflect this mounting confusion and frustration. Japanese nurses and medical personnel documented repeated instances where American soldiers returned from severe wounds to participate in coordinated counterattacks, defying predictions based on prior experience in the Pacific. Officers noted that their traditional attrition strategies were rendered less effective, as the enemy's resilience was amplified by a system they could neither anticipate nor counteract directly. The psychological toll on Japanese troops was compounded by the visible efficiency and calm of the American medical teams. In forward positions, nurses observed surgeons operating under artillery bombardment with unwavering focus, instruments moving in synchronized precision, and casualty flow managed as if guided by an invisible order. For soldiers conditioned to expect panic, improvisation, and delay in battlefield medicine, this was disconcerting, even demoralizing. The mere presence of such organized and effective care introduced uncertainty into Japanese tactical calculations. The perception of inevitability, the understanding that the Americans would recover, adapt, and continue fighting despite injuries, forced adjustments in both offensive and defensive operations. Commanders began hesitating before committing troops to positions where previous attrition tactics might have sufficed. They recognized that the cost in manpower would not yield the expected strategic advantage, as American medical efficiency preserved not only life, but the fighting capacity of units. This invisible but decisive factor also reshaped engagement dynamics. Japanese soldiers, confronting a system in which survival was engineered with precision, experienced a shift in the psychological equilibrium of combat. The anticipated terror of wounding was mitigated for Americans, while the Japanese encountered an unanticipated persistence in enemy operations. Field accounts indicate repeated instances of confusion, as soldiers observed adversaries who should have been incapacitated returning to the fight, contributing to a sense of disorientation that undermined morale and command confidence. Moreover, the integration of medical capabilities into operational doctrine exemplified a broader evolution in the American approach to warfare. Survival was treated as a force multiplier, operational readiness as a measurable asset, and medical innovation as a tactical weapon. Every advance in surgical technique, every improvement in equipment, and every logistical refinement translated directly into sustained offensive pressure and strategic advantage. The psychological effects extended to battlefield perception as well. Japanese forces, trained to respect discipline, courage, and endurance, now faced a system that combined these virtues with technological mastery and human skill, in a way that challenged fundamental assumptions about the nature of strength and vulnerability. Japanese nurses noted the subtle but undeniable influence on morale. Soldiers felt less despair in the face of injury, while commanders were forced to reckon with a resilient enemy whose capacity to absorb and recover from wounds exceeded expectations. The cumulative effect of these factors was profound. Tactical engagements, such as those near Hacksaw Ridge and the Western Beaches, demonstrated that the presence of advanced medical units directly influenced the pace and outcome of combat operations. Units remained cohesive, attacks maintained momentum, and casualties, while unavoidable, were rapidly mitigated, preserving combat effectiveness at critical junctures. The Americans' ability to maintain operational continuity, despite battlefield losses, forced Japanese commanders to reconsider the efficacy of conventional attrition-based strategies. This was not merely a matter of human resource management. It was a psychological confrontation with an enemy whose resilience had been engineered and whose capacity for recovery was systematically integrated into the conduct of war. Japanese diaries, post-battle reports, and intercepted communications reveal the profound impact on enemy planning and perception. Soldiers expressed amazement at the rapid return of comrades from severe injuries, while officers noted the diminishing returns of tactics designed to inflict maximum casualties. The American medical advantage, previously invisible, had become an integral component of operational calculus, reshaping the strategic landscape in ways that extended beyond immediate engagements. In essence, the hidden power of American surgical and medical innovation created a dual advantage. It preserved life while simultaneously amplifying combat effectiveness and morale. It undermined enemy expectations, disrupted psychological assumptions, and reshaped tactical decision-making. The presence of advanced medical capability at Okinawa demonstrated that survival could be as decisive a weapon as firepower. Mobility or armor, transforming battlefield medicine from a logistical necessity into a strategic instrument of war. By combining rapid treatment, technological innovation, and disciplined execution, the Americans achieved a form of asymmetric advantage that confounded the Japanese, preserved operational cohesion, and influenced the broader conduct of the Pacific Campaign. The battlefields of Okinawa thus became a testament to the evolving nature of modern warfare, where engineering, preparation, and human skill intersected to create an invisible force multiplier, reshaping both physical and psychological landscapes of combat, and proving that in the crucible of war, the ability to preserve life could be as decisive as the ability to take it. As the last echoes of artillery faded over the scarred beaches and jagged cliffs of Okinawa, the legacy of American medical innovation became unmistakably clear. What had begun as a subtle, almost invisible advantage, the integration of advanced surgical tools, rapid evacuation protocols, and highly trained personnel, had grown into a decisive factor shaping not only the outcome of the battle but the broader trajectory of the Pacific, while soldiers who had been expected to fall were returning to their units with remarkable speed, sustaining operational momentum and morale. Commanders could rely on the continuity of their forces in ways that their Japanese counterparts could scarcely comprehend. This advantage extended beyond the immediate tactical realm, influencing strategic calculations, psychological resilience, and post-war military doctrine. Japanese officers, who had long relied on attrition and the inevitability of battlefield losses as instruments of strategy, found themselves confronting a reality they had not anticipated. Their doctrine assumed that inflicting casualties would weaken enemy cohesion, erode morale, and gradually tilt the battlefield in their favor. Yet at Okinawa, these assumptions were repeatedly confounded. Units that should have been crippled remained functional. Soldiers who should have been removed from combat returned, stabilized and battle-ready. Diaries and field reports from Japanese nurses provide vivid testimony. They recorded surgeons operating with calm precision under fire, instruments sterilized and ready, casualties evacuated and treated with unprecedented efficiency. The psychological impact was profound. American soldiers advanced with the confidence that injury was no longer a death sentence. Morale remained high even amidst the relentless chaos of bombardment, counterattacks, and entrenched defenses. The Japanese, in turn, faced uncertainty and frustration. Their attacks did not produce the anticipated attrition. Their strategies were rendered less effective by an invisible advantage they could neither predict nor counter. Beyond the battlefield, the innovations pioneered at Okinawa reverberated through military thought for decades to come. The principles of forward surgical integration, mobile and well-equipped medical units, and rapid, efficient treatment became foundational to post-war doctrines. During the Korean War, Gulf War, and subsequent conflicts, the lessons learned in the Pacific about preserving human capital as a strategic asset were applied in increasingly sophisticated ways. Networked communications, portable surgical suites, and real-time coordination between field units and rear hospitals all traced conceptual lineage to the innovations observed at Okinawa. In a broader sense, the battle underscored a timeless lesson about the nature of warfare. Technology and human ingenuity, when applied with foresight and precision, can transform vulnerability into strength. The Americans had not merely brought superior firepower, they had engineered survival into the structure of their operations, converting medical capability into a tactical and psychological weapon. Soldiers survived, Units remained cohesive, and campaigns could advance with a tempo that confounded enemy expectations. For the Japanese nurses who witnessed these developments firsthand, the experience left an indelible mark. Their observations documented not only technical proficiency, but a philosophical shift in the understanding of warfare. They recorded a form of combat where preservation of life was as calculated, deliberate, and integrated into strategy as artillery barrages or infantry maneuvers. These insights would influence both Japanese post-war medical systems and military thought, demonstrating the enduring impact of innovations conceived under the pressures of total war. The legacy of Okinawa extended even further, shaping modern concepts of network-centric warfare. The synchronization of personnel, technology, and logistics observed on those beaches foreshadowed the integrated battlefield systems of the late 20th and early 21st centuries. Communication, coordination, and the rapid application of specialized knowledge became central tenets of operational doctrine, proving that survival, efficiency, and adaptability could serve as force multipliers in ways that traditional metrics of firepower alone could not achieve. In reflection, the story of American medical innovation at Okinawa stands as a testament to the evolution of modern combat. It highlights the intersection of technology, human skill, and strategic foresight, illustrating that advantages in war are not always visible on the battlefield's surface. Sometimes they reside in the quiet precision of a surgeon's hands, the hum of a generator powering a suction device, or the coordinated rhythm of medics and nurses moving as one. In the crucible of conflict, these factors can tip the balance of survival, operational effectiveness, and ultimately, victory. The Japanese nurses, whose astonishment and meticulous records preserved the truth of these advances, provide a human lens on what might otherwise be abstract technical achievement. Their testimony reminds us that innovation in war is measured not only by instruments or tactics, but by the lives preserved, the morale sustained, and the cohesion maintained under unimaginable pressure. Okinawa became a proving ground not just for firepower but for foresight, adaptability, and the transformative potential of integrating life-saving capability directly into combat operations. Field Marshal Keitel might have observed tanks and artillery and measured strength by destruction, but the Americans demonstrated that connection, preparation, and precision could amplify human potential in ways that armor alone could never achieve. In the end, the battle offers a lesson that resonates far beyond the Pacific. In modern war, survival engineered with ingenuity and coordination can be as decisive as firepower, and the ability to preserve life under pressure often determines the course of history. In that crucible of smoke, sand, and relentless fire, the quiet precision of American surgeons became a force of unprecedented strategic significance, reshaping both the immediate conflict and the enduring understanding of what it truly means to wage war.